When you push a button on a computer, you expect to get an instant result. You tap on that button on your phone, you click on it on your computer, you expect that you're going to see something happen pretty much instantly. And if something doesn't happen, you start to wait for a few seconds, you start to get like, okay, is something actually going to happen? So you start to say, okay, you're going to maybe tap on it a few more times, see if maybe it just didn't happen the first time. You're going to start tapping on other buttons in the same program or page because you're going to wonder, okay, maybe it's something wrong with the page. And then you're going to start doing things like, okay, maybe the program itself is the issue. I'm going to close that down, see if I can open a different program. Maybe it's just my entire computer, my entire device that is slow right now. And this is something that happens all the time pretty intuitively, but this is also actually a very important lesson about something called feedback. So when you are interacting with a product or an environment which is well designed, feedback is going to be something that is very carefully considered, whether it is positive feedback or negative feedback. When you perform an action, you expect a pretty much instant result, which is feedback, which tells you about the success or failure of the action that you've just attempted. A really classic example is a door. It's not very common to think about the design of a door per se, because the door is a piece of technology that has been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So we pretty much have a sense of like, it's a door, you open it, that's it. But it's also a really interesting technology because it has that positive and negative feedback built in. When you try and push on a door when you need to pull, you're not going to get any result. That's immediate negative feedback that tells you, hey, you were trying to do the wrong thing. Conversely, if you push on the door and it turns out that it opens, you know that you were pushing it from the correct direction and therefore you're doing the right thing and you get that immediate positive feedback. Likewise, you might do something like accidentally touch a hot stove. You're immediately going to pull your hand away because you immediately get negative feedback in the form of pain, which is then going to tell you, hey, you should not keep doing this action, stop doing it immediately. So you do. Now imagine a system that is very poorly designed. Let's imagine that we have the example of that program from previously where you're pushing a button and you're expecting an instant result. Maybe it's something where in this program you push a button, maybe it takes 10, 20 seconds for the program to actually run whatever task the button is supposed to do. And let's imagine now that that program now doesn't give you any indication that it's doing that work in the background. It doesn't give you a loading bar, it doesn't give you any kind of graphic whatsoever, so you have no way of knowing what's going on back there. Realistically, you're not going to think that it's working. You're going to tap on the button, you're going to see no result for a couple seconds, you're going to start wondering what's going on, and potentially you're just going to end up closing out of the program by the time it actually finishes running the task. So of course, computer programs get around this by finding ways to show people that it is working in the background, giving them that positive feedback saying, yes, you did the right thing, your action is being carried out, but it's just not quite done yet. And so that's where you're going to see things like loading bars, that's where you're going to see things like little loading circles and so on. These are little graphical indications that it is working in the background. And of course, even if these graphical indications are giving you a sense of your progress, you might see that, like, for example, you've got a loading bar and then it seems to stop for a long time. And that's going to then make you wonder and worry, hey, maybe it stopped working. Maybe I need to, close out the program and start it again and that sort of thing. So of course, when you're designing a program, you ideally want to create a situation in which it doesn't have to be sitting there loading for so long that your user might tap on a button and then be confronted with such a long loading bar that they just don't know if they're making progress at points. See, the thing is that human brains like to have basically instantaneous feedback because that's when you get that really, really immediate sense of whether or not you need to continue doing this action or whether you need to try something else. Now imagine if you had touched the hot stove, and yes, you did have pain receptors, and pain was a signal that is communicated to your brain when you do something bad to your body, but let's imagine that it takes a minute for that pain signal to reach you. As a result, you might spend a minute with your hand touching a hot stove, you might have a pretty bad burn by the time you realize that you shouldn't be doing that. Humans naturally use feedback from their environment to determine whether to stick with certain behaviors or to stop doing certain behaviors. We will seek out this feedback in terms of positive and negative cues, and we will use these cues to determine how to act. Unfortunately, lots of positive and negative behaviors have basically no immediate feedback at all, Or they may have feedback on such a delayed timer that you may have no way of really connecting them to the actions that caused them. For example, if you are starting a workout program and you're wondering how long it's going to take you to see results, well, it could take you weeks or months to really see basically any visible result in terms of building more muscle mass, looking better in the mirror, and so on. And so in the meantime, you might really think well, I've done all kinds of other things. Maybe I'm looking better because of all this other stuff I was doing. It's very hard to nail down exactly what was causing all of that. The reality is probably just that it was, training hard and consistently over time, but you've got all of these other things that can get in the way because the longer that it takes for feedback to arrive, the more it can be confused about the exact source of what's causing that feedback as well. It might also be a situation where you're not doing a very good job of basically just analyzing your progress. You don't have a system in place for saying, okay, for example, I was X amount of strong, 3 months ago, now I'm Y amount of strong, and a month from now I'm Z amount of strong. Most people are not really carefully writing down exact levels of their progress so that they can see how much they're progressing from week to week or month to month. And so it's also something where you just might not have a sense, realistically, of how much you have progressed. You can maybe tell that you have progressed in some way, but you can't really tell how much, and that feels kind of discouraging. You can't really tell, again, what's working and what's not. And of course, there are plenty of situations where it takes so long for a positive feedback to arrive that you just get impatient and quit. Likewise, there are also plenty of situations where something might be basically sort of a negative feedback in the short term, but positive feedback in the long term, and vice versa. So for example, working out, you're probably not going to enjoy it too much in the short term. It's exhausting, it doesn't necessarily feel good, but then you are going to get positive results out of it in the long term. Vice versa, there are things that definitely feel good in the short term, like, say, for example, just sitting on the couch all day, not moving around, eating a ton of junk food, etc., but that's not necessarily going to be helpful to you in the long run. And because it can take that negative feedback a while to reach you, it might be too late by the time it arrives to really undo that behavior. There are also plenty of ways that you can make your situation better by controlling or managing your environment. So, for example, if you have a really good boss at your job who gives you lots of feedback that is both positive and negative to give you a sense of when you're doing well and when you're not, and gives you that feedback on a timely basis, then you have a good sense of how to perform your job and how to get better. On the other hand, if you have a job who doesn't give you feedback, gives you very inconsistent or highly critical feedback, that's not really going to give you any sense of how you should be performing, and that's going to be really difficult to deal with in the long term. There are plenty of ways that you can consciously look for ways to create positive and negative feedback just automatically in terms of your environment and your behaviors. The biggest problem a lot of people have is simply being impatient when it comes to that feedback. A lot of people don't have the patience to follow a longer term project to completion over a long period of time, or they get discouraged in the short term because, again, it takes a while for that positive feedback to arrive from the good behaviors that they are doing, and so they get convinced that they are making mistakes, that they are not making progress, and so on. Our environment is often fighting against us. Companies are constantly creating products to give you that small hit of dopamine because, of course, they know that the more positive feedback they can give you in the form of products that you use and enjoy, the more you're going to spend money, the more you are going to give them. So, of course, they're going to create really palatable foods. They're going to create things like, social media that keeps you addicted to it all day. They are constantly trying to capture your attention so that they can make more money off of you. And that means that our modern world is full of all kinds of temptations that are trying to distract us, derail us, and keep us from focusing on our long-term efforts. This isn't just a story about self-control or delayed gratification. It's about learning to look for and identify those longer-term sources of positive and negative feedback, those longer-term satisfactions that you get out of your activities, and learning to focus on those, even though in the short term, it might seem like, things are not going well. So that is all for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, don't hesitate to comment down below. Let me know what you would like to see in future videos. Like, comment, subscribe, tell all of your friends about this video, and so on. I will see you all next week. Have a good one.